super excited and a little bit nervous today because Will is with us. He's the global guru of learning evaluation. And I remember the time I was telling him 3 years back when a colleague from UNESCO shared his paper with me, and that really changed the way I ever thought about learning design. So it's been my dream to host him in this space, and just so happy to have you here. So, just to break this little ice and also to get to know our speaker in a fun way, I'm going to ask you 6 questions, Will. And I'm going to ask you to answer those in a few words or just a line. Okay, so this is the rapid fire round. Are you ready, Will?
I will do my best.
Okay, all right, let's go for it. So, one thing you are trying to learn these days, what's that?
I'm still learning about learning evaluation.
Oh, okay, still learning. Wow. What's the one personal habit that has helped you in your career?
I think it's trying to remember that the work we do as learning professionals is really important. We do good work.
Okay, okay. In one line, how would you describe your philosophy on learning evaluation?
In one line, yeah, right. Um, Basically, let's do it better. It's really complex. We're not aiming for perfection, but we can make it better.
Wow, that's amazing how you summed up decades of work in just a line. Yes.
Hey,
Uh,
I'm following the instructions.
okay, if you could wave a magic wand to double the impact of training transfer, what would you change?
We have to stop teaching so much content and give more realistic practice.
Oh my, that resonated hard with me. Thanks. What's the most unusual or surprising evaluation question you've ever recommended?
Well, I'm not sure that I can remember because I've done thousands, but there's one that a client asked me. It was a nonprofit organization. They said, "Hey, we're really values-based. Can we create a learner survey question to get at whether our workshop exemplifies our values?" And so we developed a question for that.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. Well, my last question to you. How would you explain LTEM, this grand model that we're going to talk about, in just a few words to someone who's outside of the L&D world?
Like to my mom or something. LTEM is a learning evaluation framework that builds in wisdom from the learning sciences. So we're trying to evaluate learning. So LTEM brings that wisdom in so that we can think about it in an appropriate way.
Wow. Thanks a ton, Will. I'll give you 5 on 5 for that. But for the others who really don't know much about Will, I'm going to give you a little background into his work. So, Will Thalheimer is world-renowned thought leader in research-based practices for learning and learning evaluation. He's written the award-winning book called Performance-Focused Learner Surveys and the CEO's Guide to Training, E-Learning and Work, which launched just last year. He created the Learning Transfer Evaluation Model, the LTEM model, which is a revolutionary framework for measuring training effectiveness. He also conducts boot camp on this model if you're interested in learning how to apply it. A few fun facts about him that I just found online. He founded the Debunker Club in 2015, which is a community devoted to rooting out learning myths. So he's challenged widely popular but unscientific models like
Recording in
70
progress.
10, or universal rate of forgetting curve, and of course, learning styles. He once offered a cash reward, which is now up to $5,000 for anyone who can prove that teaching to preferred learning styles improves outcomes. So that's a challenge that remains unclaimed. So really over to 72 plus people who are here. If you want to earn $5,000, then prove to Will that teaching to learning styles works. So that's a little bit intro to Will's work. And Will, I'm just going to hand over to you. Please walk us through your model and tell us what's wrong with the way we are evaluating learning today.
Great. So first I'll say that I put up $1,000 and then a whole bunch of other people said, "Hey, we'll put up money too." So it wasn't just me. Let me get my slides ready for you here. All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to spend about 25 minutes talking about some foundational ideas in learning evaluation, including LTEM and performance-focused learner surveys. So where did the screen go? All right. All right, can you see my screen? Thumbs up. All right, excellent. All right, so we'll talk about some foundational things. Thank you to the learning designers community. I love what you're doing, how you're supporting each other and thinking more deeply about important topics. So how are we doing? I'm going to start you all out with a question, and we can put our answers in the chat. How is your L&D team doing in creating impact? You could say, A, we do not often measure impact, so I'm not sure. B, we measure impact with surveys, so I can't be sure. C, we measure knowledge, decision-making, and task performance, so I'm fairly confident we're creating impact. D, we measure work impact with some partially rigorous evaluation practices, so I'm somewhat confident we are creating impact. Or E, we measure impact rigorously, so I know we are creating impact.
Well, I'm just gonna, the view that we're seeing, it's got the Google Doc that both of us were working on, all the prep, and then we can
Uh,
see a little, maybe you need to
okay,
expand the
all right.
slides.
I shared the wrong thing. All right, here we go.
You got to see all the prep that goes behind it, guys.
Okay. It's a good, yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah. Okay. Not great. Okay. So what are our answers? I see B's and C's. Okay, so we're a little bit all over the map. So keep your answers coming if you had to find out where the chat was, etc. I'll say that in general, most of us don't feel we're doing that well. In fact, let's take a look at that. So a few years ago, I noticed we made some common mistakes in learning evaluation, and I thought I'd write an article on it. And I thought I might find 10 or 15 things to write about, but pretty soon, boom, it went up to 54. So there's a lot of common mistakes we make in learning evaluation, a lot of misconceptions we have. When I worked for Tier 1, we did a global global survey of learning professionals. And one of the questions we asked was, in general, is your learning team able to do the learning measurement it wants to do? 47%, almost half of us said no, we would like to make substantial improvements. Another 18% said we want to make modest improvements. Now, some of us were fairly happy, about a quarter of us. We're mostly satisfied, but we continue to improve our evaluations as needed. This one really hurts me. I'm a research guy. Only 5% of us say we're generally using sound, research-supported evaluation practices. There were a few other answers as well, but look at the overall trend. 65% of us feel like we're not able to do what we want to do. That's 2/3 of us. That's pretty damning. In fact, this frustration has been going on for a long time. Even Donald Kirkpatrick back in 1967 said, the evaluation of training programs in terms of results is progressing at a very slow rate. Another guru, Rob Brinkerhoff, said, hey, with some notable exceptions, relatively little work has been devoted to making evaluations more useful and worthwhile. In 2018, I partnered with the e-learning guild. We did some research. We asked learning professionals, hey, what do you think? 52% said they wanted to substantially change what they're doing now. So if you feel like maybe you're not where you want to be, don't worry about it. Don't beat yourselves up. A lot of us feel the same way. One of the things I believe really important is that we can actually create competitive advantages with learning and development. In fact, I wrote a book on that. You can see the subtitle, Empowering Learning for a Competitive Advantage. Let's talk about, let me give you an example of how that might work. So the learning sciences. There's a whole bunch of learning factors, learning design factors we can use. In the book, I highlighted just 4 of them. And those are retrieval practice, the spacing effects, context alignment, and feedback. If you look at the research on those and you do all those things reasonably well, you're likely to get 100% improvement in your learning outcomes. That's doubling your learning outcomes. Now imagine you have one team that's using the learning sciences and they're getting double the results versus another team that's not. That's a major competitive advantage. So that's just an example. Let's think about what this means for learning evaluation. There's really four things that learning evaluation helps us with in creating a competitive advantage. Number one, if we align our evaluations with the learning sciences, evaluation helps us build more effective learning and achieve better work performance. Focusing on direct learning outcomes like decision-making and task performance, we gain leverage over our learning designs. Expanding evaluation beyond completion rates and surveys, we nudge ourselves to gather more important data. And aiming for improved decision-making, we will design our evaluation practices to target the most meaningful metrics. So there's really a lot we can do with learning evaluation. I'm a big believer that we can really make a difference in our organizations and for our learners. I always like to introduce myself a little bit. Shraddha did a great job, but I want to make sure that you understand where my sweet spots are, where my blind spots might be, where my perspectives might come from, where my biases might lie. So I've been around a long time. In fact, last month was my 40th year, 40th year in the field. I've played a number of different roles. I work with all different types of clients over the years. Most of my time is spent at work learning research, my consulting practice. I'm known for doing research translations, looking at the scientific research on learning, memory, instruction, and performance, and then translating that research into practical recommendations. Over the years, I actually added it up recently, over 20,000 hours looking at the science and compiling it. I write research to practice reports. These are all available on the Work Learning Research website. I got interested in learning evaluation. I started writing about it back in 2007. And one of the things I saw that we could use better learner surveys. So I wrote a book on that. It's now in its second edition. And I also created the LTEM framework. I will tell you this, that, people come to me and they say, Will, we want to hire you. You're a worldwide expert on learning evaluation. And, I think to myself, oh, that's so nice. They like me. But there's this little voice in the back of my head that says, Thalheimer, you still have a lot to learn. And it's true. Learning evaluation is really complex. And we're all learning about it, and I'm learning about it too. I teach a workshop called the LTEM Boot Camp. It's a 6-week thing. This book sounds like it's just for senior leaders, but it's really for us as well. All right. So that's my little introduction to me. Let's talk about some research-based stuff. So this is smile sheets. You can see these are paper-based versions, but we have Likert-like scales, numeric scales. Probably seen a lot of those around. This is what we think about them. In your opinion, how useful is the data you get from your learning designs, your learner surveys, and helping you improve your learning designs, your learning delivery, and your learning support? I don't know if you can read a fine print. I'll blow it up for you, but you can see where most people came out on this. This was a survey of learning professionals. Most of us think that our learner surveys are only somewhat or not very useful. Only 15% thought they were very useful. So we have some skepticism about this. But what does the science say? These are two meta-analyses, scientific studies of many other scientific studies. In fact, together, they covered over 150 scientific studies. And what they did is they tried to correlate our smile sheets with our learning results. And here's what they found. The smile sheets were correlated with learning results at 0.09. Now, statisticians tell us anything below 0.30 is a weak correlation. So this is virtually no correlation at all. If you get high marks on your smile sheets, you could have an effective course, but almost equally likely an ineffective course. If you get low marks on your smile sheets, you could have a poorly designed course, but almost equally likely a well-designed course. With traditional smile sheets, we just can't tell. Now, when I first saw this data, I'm like, okay, all right, that's it. We should not use any learner surveys. But then I realized, well, wait a minute, we've been doing this for decades. It's a tradition. And also it's respectful to ask our learners what they think. So we're going to be doing it anyway. Can we make them better? And my answer was yes. All right. If this information you think it might be valuable to share with your stakeholders if you want to sort of push for a change, this article at this link. And by the way, I'll share the slides, and Shraddha, you can send them out to everybody. So don't feel you need to take a picture or anything. There's 4 meta-analyses in an article that goes with it. So you can have that as evidence for convincing folks. Now, if that wasn't enough, there's also a ton of research, and this may surprise you, that learners, we as learners, we should include ourselves, we don't always know learning. There's some misconceptions we have when we're learning. In fact, there's a ton of research on this. I'll let you see some of the research headlines. You can just skim through some of these. In fact, there's 3 recent reviews, scientific reviews, that show that learners have a lack of knowledge about learning. Now think about this. This has profound impact on our learning designs. Sometimes we ask our learners what they want in the designs. Well, maybe that's not going to work out so well. When I saw this research, I said, well, I don't want to stop asking questions of the learners, but now I know that I need to design my questions so that I'm asking them, the learners, about things that they have good visibility into, that they have good wisdom about. I want to obviously avoid bias, but I got to ask questions that are precise and focused on things that they know about, that they can tell us about. That has big implications for our survey design. All right, I'm going to come back to learner surveys in a bit, show you what a good learner survey question looks like. But I'm going to introduce you now to LTEM. So LTEM is a one-page framework, and there's a back sheet now that goes with it, helpful hints. If you're familiar with LTEM from before, there's a new version out at the end of last year, so you should grab that. I'll give you the link to that. There's also a 52-page report that goes with it. These are all available for free on the LTEM webpage. So many of us are familiar with the Kirkpatrick 4-level model. I see some heads shaking yes. You might hear me call it the Kirkpatrick-Cassell 4-level model. It turns out that Raymond Cassell is actually the originator of the 4-level idea. And then Donald Kirkpatrick added the labels and popularized it. So I feel both gentlemen deserve credit. Here's what's the scientists, and these are some of the top training scientists in the world. This is a top-tier scientific journal. This is what they said about the 4-level model. I'll let you read this. So that's pretty damning. But they weren't the only group. Here's another group of scientists. Now, these critiques, although they may be accurate, I think it's a little bit over the top. And every model has strengths and limitations, including the models that I develop. Okay, I'm going to now share with you LTEM's 8 tiers. And before I do that, though, I took the words off so I could show you the color scheme. And these red areas down here, these mean by measuring attendance, completion rates, and learner activity, and the lower level learner perceptions, these are not good enough to validate our success. Yellow, sort of mediocre, and the green is good and helpful. So everybody wants to know, how do these compare to the 4-level model? So level 1 reaction is the same as learner perceptions. Level 2 learning, in LTEM, we break it down into knowledge, decision-making, and task performance. And this is where some of the learning wisdom is added. In the level 2 bucket here, we could be measuring the regurgitation of trivia. We could measure the recall or recognition of meaningless information or meaningful information. We could measure decision-making. We could measure task performance. We could measure skills. Now, that's a wide continuum from trivia to skills. And yet, what do we typically do? Oh, we need a level 2. Let's do a knowledge check. That's too low level. And it doesn't get us thinking about learning design factors. So a big plus for LTEM there. Level 3 behavior is the same as transfer to work performance, although there's some fine print here. And level 4 results similar to the effects of transfer. I'm going to share just 2 examples of how LTEM can work. I'm really condensing this. As Shraddha mentioned, I teach this LTEM boot camp. It's 6 weeks. There's a ton of content, so I'm really narrowing it down. But two ways that people are using LTEM. One, to do a gap analysis. Hey, what are we doing now? Okay, we're doing that. Not as good as we like. What do we want to do later this year? What do we want to do next year? So a simple way for us to visualize where are we? What do we want to do? Another one, and this is one of my favorite uses of LTEM, is for learning design. And someone actually did their doctoral dissertation on this. And here's the idea. We're developing a new learning program, and we introduce LTEM. We start thinking about LTEM in this program. And then before we set our learning objectives, we set evaluation objectives. So let's think about maybe we're training sales managers to coach their sales reps. And maybe we say, okay, well, how might we measure that? And we've come up with a bunch of things. And one thing we come up with is, hey, we're going to actually measure the sales, and the sales people will get their feedback on how good the coaching is. So that will be one of our objectives. We're going to measure that. Only then do we set our learning objectives. And this is critical because when we set our evaluation objectives, we can focus on authentic behaviors. Sometimes when we set learning objectives, we sort of default to those action verbs. Learners will be able to describe or list or explain. Those are very low level, and it tends to push us to create learning designs that aren't that effective. So then we do what we normally do. We design learning, we deploy learning, we measure learning, we improve the learning based on what we learn, and we actually get educated ourselves. If we have good evaluation, we as a learning team, we as individuals, learning professionals, improve as well. Now, here's the cover page from Elham Arabi's doctoral dissertation, Dr. Elham Arabi now. And she did this really interesting thing. She was working with nurse professional development in a hospital, and she had 2 hypotheses. One was, if I introduce LTEM, the team will decide to use better learning evaluation methods. Well, that's sort of obvious, right? Because it's an evaluation framework. But her second hypothesis was the really interesting one. If I introduce LTEM to a learning team, they'll be inspired to use better learning designs. And that's exactly what she found. And you can imagine how that would happen. Let's say we decide, we set our evaluation objectives, and we're going to evaluate our program based on these nurses' decision-making competence. So we're designing this program. We're thinking, hey, we're going to be evaluated on decision-making. What should we do for our designs? Oh, we should make sure we give a lot of decision-making practice. And of course, that's how it worked. By the way, if any of you are interested, Elham has given me permission to share the dissertation with you, so reach out to me. I'll share my email later. Okay, jumping quickly to performance-focused learner surveys. Before I talk about them, I want to acknowledge something that's happened in the learning field the last 10, 15, 20 years. That is, the research on learning is really solidified around some very strong recommendations. And you can see that in the work of these research translators like Patty Shank, Miriam Nealon, Carl Kopp, Julie Dirksen, Clark Quinn, and of course the legendary Ruth Clark. So we've got these learning science. We should obviously use that for our learning design, but we also ought to make sure that our learning evaluation work is aligned with the science of learning. So when we talk about performance-focused learner surveys, we're talking about LTEM Tier 3A. Here is a better learner survey question. I'll take you through it, then I'll tell you why I like it. How able are you to put what you've learned into practice in your work? Choose the one option that best describes your current readiness. I'll let you read the answers. So it's obviously about something important on the job performance. The answer choices here are really important. These are called distinctive answer choices because they're more distinct than a Likert-like scale. I do not recommend Likert scales or numeric scales because they're too fuzzy. What this does, these distinctive answer choices, has three benefits. Number one, the learners are more motivated to complete our learner surveys. Have you ever seen a paper-based learner surveys? A whole bunch of people are circling the same number down the answer sheet. Well, they're not really processing. And when they're not processing, we don't get good data. So one is motivation. Two, we're supporting them in decision making. They're not struggling between, well, is this strongly agree or agree? We're giving them more concrete answer choices. I need more guidance or do I need more experience? So when they think more deeply, we get better data. And the third reason is, typically if we do Likert scale, numeric scale, we've got a bunch of averages and they all are like between 3.8 and 4.5 and there's hardly any differentiation. And then we get paralyzed. We don't know what's good, what's bad, so we don't do anything. Here, the data we can get can be much more clear. It can look like this. 30% of people chose I need more guidance. 42% said I need more experience. And we've created these standards here to go with each question. So the data we can be very clear about what's good and what's not good. Another surprising thing about our learner survey questions is we can actually send messages. So this question in general sends a message that, hey, what happens after learning is really important. And there's different things we can support. So we might think, oh, wow, managers, well, maybe this is so important, we got to get managers support. Maybe coach or mentors. Maybe the course instructor shouldn't disappear. So it sends messages to us in the learning team about what to do. There's a great story in the book, a guy by the name of Ian Blake. He's a learning professional like you and I. And he wanted to introduce these new type of questions. And he tailored this question, which I do recommend, and he added an answer choice. Now remember, the learners are answering this. And one of their choices was, I will be added to my instructor's Yammer group so we can have discussions after the learning is over. And so Ian's smart. He didn't want to just roll this out. So he invited some of these trainers into his office one at a time and got their feedback on the new survey before it was released. And one day this guy comes in and he look in the questions and the first question is good. The second question is, well, what about this wording? I'm not sure everybody will understand that. Got to this question and the guy goes, Yammer? That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Nobody's going to add Yammer to their course. That's dumb. And Ian's smart guy, was not defensive, said, thank you very much. The very next morning, the guy came back to Ian and said, I was in the shower last night. I was thinking about that Yammer idea. That's brilliant. That's going to really help me support the learners in learning. I'm going to add that to all my courses now. Now think about that. This survey had never been finalized. No learner had ever seen it. No data had ever been collected. And yet already this question was having an impact on our learning practices. So just another way to think about our learning design. Okay, so I've given you a quick introduction. There's a lot more to learn. I'm going to put these links in the slides, and you can grab some of these. The LTEM web page is here. I saw that went into the chat as well. Thank you. LTEM Bootcamp, if you're interested in what's taught there, you can check it out. There's also a document there that has like over 100 learning points that are taught in the LTEM Bootcamp. If you want, you can just grab that. There's also questions I've developed. I've been working with Ingeborg Kruse of the Netherlands, and we developed questions that you can ask on your learner surveys to ensure that all your learners are included and are able to learn. So there's some different learning things. Obviously, the book are available too. So with that, and there's my email if you want to get in touch with me. Also LinkedIn. I'll put my email in the chat if you want El Hammurabi's dissertation. So with that, I'm going to end there, and yeah.
Thanks so much, Will. There was so much in there packed in good 20, 25 minutes and so many resources, but also so many insights that you quickly went over, starting from, just Likert scale, I think we've just used, all of us have used that in even in RCTs. Like, we spend tons of money using those scales, and yet there's always people who are just sort of going with three, 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 all answers in the middle, agree, disagree, and you're like, I don't know what that really means. And they'll just, so we all been there. From that to just talking us through, the Kirkpatrick model, and how some of the most critical nuances there in level 2 may be missing, and how LTEM can help us think that through, to also talking about how evaluation isn't just about proving learning, but also you talk a lot about evaluation being using that to improve learning, not just to prove but to improve learning, and the impact that good surveys can have in the way we think about design. And us, many of us here conduct training of trainers. So how do you get trainers to also think about the learning design and more effectively? So I have some follow-up questions, Will, for you.
Sure.
There's many, but I'll just take a few, and then there's some amazing questions coming up already on the chat, so we'll leave some room for that as well. Uh, you know, Will, you warned us against focusing only on the impact, which is the LTEM tier 8, I believe. So don't just look at the impact, but also measure the lower levels. So because there are people from development sector here who funders are always asking for what's the impact of this training. Show us the final impact. There's academic heads asking for just change in scores, and there's CEOs, who are always asking for the final performance, like did the sales improve? Like, but you say that that's not the only level to evaluate. Can you tell us why evaluating lower levels is equally important?
Yeah. So with LTEM, when we think about impact, I would add maybe tier 7 and 8 together. But those are certainly important and critical. But there's been a trend in our industry to focus just on impact, and I think it's dangerous. If you think about learning, there's a causal chain between the learning and the performance situation. So if we're going to be successful, we have to make sure that the content is good, that it was vetted, it's relevant, valid. Um, we have to make sure that the learners are engaged, they're paying attention in a way that helps them learn. My doctoral dissertation advisor, Ernie Rothkopf, had a word for that called themogenic. Don't just create attention, but create attention that leads to learning. We want to make sure the learners comprehend things clearly, that they're able to remember what they've learned, that they're motivated to apply what they've learned. Think about all these factors, and then they go into the workplace, they can overcome obstacles. Now, if we only measure the end impact, we're blind to all these other things that are critically important. So I'm not against measuring impact, but I want us not to be blind to all these really other critical learning factors.
Got it. That was very helpful, Will. My other second question to you is about, you sort of highlight some of the common traps that most people tend to fall into when measuring improvement in knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So whether I think you mentioned some of the things around measuring on the end of the learning, which you did, but also measuring in only in the learning context, relying on knowledge questions only. So can you tell us more about what are these traps and
Sure.
why we?
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of them, right? That article showed 54 common mistakes, but one thing we do is we measure just at the end of learning. But we know that people forget. So we measure at the end of learning, we haven't given people time to forget. So our learning design could be really good at helping people think about things clearly. But if that's all they do, if they forget very quickly, then we haven't measured properly. So, ideally, if we want to get a sense of whether our learning design supported remembering, then we want to measure after the delay. Also, measuring in the context, we know that the context can remind people of what they learned. So if you measure people in the learning context, they've got all these supports, the stimuli in that environment are reminding them what they learned. So that's another sort of way to sort of cheat your way to a bad evaluation.
Yeah, that made a lot of sense. Just because people are able to apply a model, let's say a communication model in the role play during the
Your sound cut out. I didn't hear you. I don't know if it's just me or.
Yes, I thought it was just me, but Shraddha, I can't hear you anymore.
No? Well,
Oh,
okay.
now you're
Now
there.
you,
Okay, all right. Will, I'll just
I left you speechless. I don't know.
I was just summing up something that you said, sharing just my own insight on how, being able to apply something that you learn in training during the role play may not actually ensure that one is able to apply that in their work, which is a more dynamic context. And then there's the forgetting that happens after the training, right? All that. Well, my third question to you, and this will be my last one, so feel free to put on chat. Some people have already been putting down their questions. If you have one, please put it on chat and Miriam will take them one by one. But my last question is LTEM is no doubt one of the most comprehensive evaluation frameworks that we've seen. But is it realistic to build a system, realistic but also desirable to build a system that collects data for all the levels? And if not, how can organizations practically start implementing LTEM?
Yeah, so LTEM is a conceptual model, and it describes 8 tiers, things to focus on. So it's helpful in getting us to think properly. Now, should we measure a learning program on all 8 of the tiers? No, it's too much. I mean, we make investments. It takes effort and time and resources and money to do an evaluation. So unless you have a very strategically important program, you're not going to want to measure every tier. You have to prioritize. So yeah, that's one of the misconceptions um, that has now been debunked on the backside of the LTEM.
So essentially, it's to get us to think about which level are we not at all concerned with? Should we be doing that? And to
Yeah.
just become more
So
aware of the fact that we may be measuring only for these levels right now.
yeah. So what I when I designed LTEM, I wanted to make sure that it sent messages, gave us nudges to think more with more wisdom about evaluation. So it says, hey, don't just talk about your completion rates or the number of people you train. That's not good enough. You could have trained them and they could have learned the wrong thing, or you could have demotivated them. Um, so LTEM really gets us to think about some of these things. It gives us wisdom about when to measure. When you talk about not the tier 4, 5, and 6, knowledge, decision making, and task performance, it reminds us, hey, don't just measure in the training, measure afterward as well, after a delay. It really, sort of nudges us to do some of these things. Now, you asked how to get started with this. Well, I do think that performance-focused learner surveys, if you're not doing those yet, and you feel like you're not, haven't really gotten started to improve your evaluation, they're a great place to start because they're fairly straightforward, fairly simple, not too much investment, but you can get some successes. You're going to begin to learn things and see things you haven't seen before. So that's a really great way to get started, but you don't want to end there. In this book, I say over and over, I think at least 20 times, don't just do learner surveys. So great place to start. That's another message that LTEM sends. Don't just end with your learner surveys. You can measure knowledge, foundational knowledge, decision making, task performance, etc.
Great. Thanks a ton, Will. I'm quickly going to pass it on to Miriam to take participants' questions now.
Thanks so much, Shraddha. Will, thank you so much for this. This has been so interesting and also very engaging. I enjoy it when I'm learning and enjoying the learning process at the same time. So thank you so much for this. It's been wonderful. I also I really have to say I really enjoy your sense of humor. So thank you for that. So bringing that in
Thanks.
also.
Thanks.
So I have quite a few questions. In no particular order. Dipti has asked, it shares that this is a beautiful model, which I agree with. And she's wondering, how do we really implement this at scale in mid to large organizations? Because I know that she works for a rather huge organization.
Yeah, so you can start small. I showed that one example of using it as a map. Hey, where are we now? Where do we want to be? You can get really big. I just took an organization yesterday through a learning evaluation strategic planning process. And we talked about 14 separate, I think it was 14 separate areas to think about. You develop a document of your learning strategy, and then you build your learning evaluation tactics based on that. So you can go in for a little or you can go in for a lot. I would start with reading the LTEM report. Gives 16 examples of how you can use LTEM, and you can get started with that right away.
Right. Oh, all right. Thank you. That's helpful. Dipti says thank you on the chat too. Bhavna's asking, how could we use LTEM not just as an evaluation model, but also as a driver to shape our learning strategy, culture, and operating model, so we can target the right behaviors and build a culture of application, etc.
Yeah, that's great. Great question. And I think the example from El Hammurabi's dissertation is a really good way. But I would look at those 16 things and think about one thing some of us do is we hire vendors to help us build training courses. So we're hiring vendors. We can say, hey, tell us what learning evaluation you've done recently on your programs. Ideally, we want to hire a vendor who's done evaluation so that they've improved their programs over time. And so we can find out how their evaluations are. I say, hey, here's LTEM. Tell us where you've been evaluating and how you do that. We can work with vendors. If we have a request for a proposal, we can put our requirements in the proposal. Say, hey, we need measurement at these tiers. How are you going to actually do that? There's a ton of ways. So go to the LTEM report, look at those example, and start using it.
I think that's something I speak for a lot of us, we're probably going to be doing tonight. Okay, we also have Setup who says there's measuring and then there's attribution. So could you please share your thoughts on this? And then he gives an example that and says, I might be measuring decision making 3 months after the workshop, but there's little to no way to know if the workshop actually impacted the decision making skill. Yeah.
That's great.
Mm.
So when we measure at tier 7 and 8, level 3 and level 4 and the 4-level model, it's really important that we make sure that the training made the difference, not something else. We do a training program and maybe the economy improves, or maybe the economy crashes, or maybe there's a management shift at the organization, or maybe we introduce a new product, or there's some scandal in our university, or something that affects, that doesn't happen here, of course, but okay, I won't talk about the news. But we don't know, so we need to make sure that we can do that. And there's a bunch of ways to do that. We spent a whole week on this in my boot camp. We can do things like randomized controlled trials. We can do time series analysis, pre-test to post-test. There's other methods as well, but those take a lot of effort. So oftentimes organizations say, well, we're going to do these only every once in a while, which I think is probably the right thing to do. But it's very important to make sure that you have sort of isolated the impact. What's training contributing, and what are other things contributing?
That makes sense. That gives me a lot to think about. I have my own follow-up questions, but just in the interest of time, Lillian, this is the last question I have on here. When it comes to evaluating courses, what would your recommendation be for evaluation of the usability and the engagement of the learning process? Because she's found that surveys and checklists that measure the effectiveness, navigation, instructor presence, content and learning assignments, and interactivity are effective, I'm assuming. So what's your take on that?
Well, there was a ask there, but it's mentioned like usability. So usability, that's a survey is not the best way to do that. Usability, you actually watch people doing what they're supposed to be doing. Even like when we build surveys, we do what's called a think aloud protocol. So we get real learners to go through the survey and we say, hey, this is going to be really awkward, but we want you to think out loud as you're answering all the questions. Tell us, if you're confused, tell us what you think about this. And that gives us insight into their thinking process. So we want to do that. Engagement, I think I heard her mention that. So there's lots of ways to get a sense of that. We have to be careful though, because we don't want just engagement. We want engagement that leads to learning. With some survey questions, we can get a little bit at that. But you can also you can sort of look in people's eyes, right? And get feedback that way. So don't always default to a survey, I guess is my point. Do what comes natural. Use your wisdom about that.
Thanks. That makes a lot of sense. We have one more question that just came up from Sridhar, who tries to get feedback from managers post-training, but no one really responds. So do you have any thoughts around navigating
Oh,
that?
Yeah. So this is the second edition of the book, and response rates were so important that I added a chapter on it in the second book. And there's 40 different suggestions for how to get better response rates. The two most important, and this doesn't relate to managers, I'll get to that in a minute, but the two most important are use better questions, number one. People see your Likert scales and numeric scales, their eyes glaze over, they know you're not getting good data, so they're not going to put effort into it. Number two, don't even wait 2 seconds after your training program to send a link for people. That kills your response rate. Give them time in your learning to fill out your learner survey. There's science on this. People have studied this. This really works. There is one special advantage if we're doing like leadership training. We're training leaders, managers in an organization, and we want to know about their performance. Have they improved as a leader? Well, they're our learners, but we could ask them questions about how the learning was. But even better, ask their direct reports. How how would you rate the leadership of your manager? And then the managers get feedback on that. But we also get feedback on, whether we have moved the needle, whether our course has actually improved those behaviors or not. In general, there's some other things you can do as well, and this probably relates to reaching out to managers. Talk about it in advance. Tell people how you've improved the course before based on the feedback. When you do, you sort of, the thing to aim for is you want to create a partnership between you and your learners. And so, write your questions in a way that's personal. One of my favorite end of questionnaire questions is there anything else we should have asked about? And then is there anything else we should have asked about? Anything else you want to tell us? So it's not this cold, this survey coming down from a cold, steely unit in corporate, right? It's more personal. Yeah.
I like that. Thank you. We have two more questions coming in, I think, and they're such great questions, so I have to give them. And Shadow's also asked a question. I'm going to leave yours till the end, so you can ask it yourself. Anna says she works in development, and one of the reasons they don't always measure impacts at tiers 5 to 7 is the huge cost of observing changes in task performance, and specifically for teachers. So
Yeah.
are there ways of measuring? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's true. We all have these logistical constraints. We may not get the money. We may not have access to our learners after they leave us. One thing we can do, and it's now more possible given the technologies we have, is we can spread our learning out over time. And teachers do this. We can do this. We teach topic A in week 1. And in week 2, we can give people some challenge questions related to topic A. And to the learners, it seems like a challenge, a part of the learning. but to us, it's a learning evaluation. And we can continue that over time. It's like a a great opportunity for us because they don't, people don't like extra tests, but if you give them challenges they feel they're learning from, that's great for them and it's great for us because we can see how well they learned. And since it's a week later, how well they remembered. And so we really have a special opportunity with that.
I love that. The teacher in me loves that. I'm gonna be thinking about that for a while. Okay, last one, I promise. I know we're short on time, Shraddha, but I really like this. This question from Shreya. Do evaluation designers need to have a real understanding of the post-training possibilities for the learners to be able to create such a descriptive and relevant,
Oh, yeah.
option for each question?
Absolutely. We should understand our learners' work performance context. I have this thing I called it the magic question many years ago. It goes something like this. What do you want your learners to be able to do? That's what we typically ask, but we have to add to that. In what context do you want them to do these things?
Hmm.
And we need to know that because the context really matters, number one. And we want to focus on authentic performances, not just, rote memorization of facts and things. I think I saw another question about what's wrong with these action verbs. Well, the action verbs are very low level. They get us to think about regurgitating knowledge. That's how we're going to test those because they're sort of low level. We want people. We want to. We're aiming to have people actually be able to perform in a complex work environment. And so anything we can do to move our assessments and our practice really to be more authentic is better for the learner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Um, I'm gonna have to stop now just in the interest of time, but thank you. This has been so insightful. And thank you for being so gracious with your answers.
Well,
Thanks so much, Lily.
and thank you. I know you did a lot of work to sort of understand what questions to ask me, and so that was very impressive, I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Will, and also for answering my question quickly. I'm just gonna, yeah, this has been fabulous, I think, and you can see the reactions of people and how you all engaged. So thanks so much, everyone, also for being totally engaged in this pretty dense session. But thanks to Will's humor, I think it just made it light also in the same way. But I just want to announce that the conversation on learning evaluation doesn't end here. We always follow up these expert talks, these sessions with what we call LDC meetup. So this is a space for practitioners to get together, munch on the ideas that experts share with us here, but also talk about what are the evaluation practices we are all using in our context, what's working for us, what's not working, how can we begin to apply LTEM in our work, right? So this is a place to just meet a bunch of people who are excited about learning evaluation from different countries, from different contexts, and also then to begin to apply it in our work. So that's happening next Wednesday. Do join us for that if you can. And then after that, Miriam, if you can move to the next slide, I also want to share this opportunity for people to contribute to this larger knowledge that we build through LDC's blog. So it's this month for the next quarter in October, November, and December, we are inviting blog submissions for innovative AI applications to reimagine learning and education. We are partnering with Learning Planet Institute. Typically, if we publish your blog, authors get a lot of collaboration and connections, requests, etc. So because it's a community of practitioners, it's a great place for you to talk about your work, showcase the innovations you are doing in AI and learning. So do submit your blog for our LEC blog as well. And one last announcement in the next slide is the masterclass. Of course, AI is changing learning to a big extent, but also changing the role that we play as learning designers. So next month we are offering a very hands-on workshop, a masterclass for learning designers on AI. It's a place to go beyond just AI tools and understand what kind of workflows will help us actually create high quality learning designs using curated AI tools. And at what stages and with what kind of best practices can we actually create learning designs that actually drive impact. So do join us for this workshop, and you can sign up for these events using our events page on Luma. The link for this will be on the chat shortly. I just want to close it with that. Will, thank you so much for being with us today, for giving your precious time. Is there anything you want to say as we close this event?
Well, I don't know. Just, LTA or learning evaluation is an important tool in our toolbox. And for too many years, we've sort of, left it as an afterthought. In fact, if you think of ADDIE is E is at the end, right? Well, E should be in our thoughts from the very beginning. We really can create competitive advantages and advantages for our learners, but also for ourselves. If we do better learning evaluation, we're learning more about what good learning design looks like and what works for our learners in our situation. So it is a win-win-win opportunity. So go forth and evaluate.